Hello and welcome. My name is Matty, and it's nice to meet everyone. This is the first episode of a new podcast that I'm starting called Vocation. And I'm very honored to have my first guest today, the great Michael Tsarion. I'll give a little bit of a background introduction to you, Michael, and then I'll pass it over to you just for you can speak a little bit about your background as well, please. But yeah, you're an Irish author, you're a researcher and public speaker, and you host the weekly brilliant Unslaved podcast with the great David Whitehead. Part of your expertise is on the occult, which includes the occult history of Ireland and of America, as well as being the author of many books and presentations and films. You recently started a new Substack there, which people should subscribe to. And you've probably about a dozen books, which I think they're all available on Amazon, so they're easy to get to and they're very reasonably priced, and so they're just packed full of information that people should look into. So I'll leave a few links below, just in towards your work. But if you'd chat a wee bit about your background, please, Michael, I'd really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. It's good to be on with you, Matty, and be part of this. Two Irish guys. That's where it all started for me in Belfast, back in the 80s, I suppose. It's a long story about how I got started, but yeah, it did start back there. A couple of important points were coming across the work of Jim Fitzpatrick, the great Irish artist. He had written some books on Celtic mythology, which for me was a very helpful introduction to the subject, which I knew absolutely nothing about. I had not seen any films, programs, documentaries, never read any books about it. Lived in Ireland and hadn't the faintest idea
Mm.
about it. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And his books had just come out. It's called the Book of Conquests, which is actually the name of an ancient Irish chronicle. And he named his book after it. In Gaelic, it's, Liber Gabala, the Book of Invasions. And he had written his little intro, colorful sort of rock art type book. And it was sitting on the desk of a teacher in art class in school. And I just couldn't believe it. And a friend of mine said, "Have you read that?" Guy sitting beside me. And I said, "What do you mean read it? Sure, it's just pictures." And he goes, "No, take a look at it." And I opened it up and couldn't believe that on one side was text. It was so artistically done that I didn't even spot the text. There's a story here. So I actually borrowed the books. There was no teacher around, so I took it home that night. I brought it back the next day. And overnight, I read that book from cover to cover. I just loved the artwork. And it was like going into a fantasy world. The same kind of experience that people have when they maybe get into Professor Tolkien or
Hmm.
C.S. Lewis. So I'd found the Irish version of those guys. C.S. Lewis was Irish, of course, himself, right? But here's another one, a contemporary one, well-known, world-famous artist.
Fantastic.
And the book just stunned me. Now, the strange thing was that after this period, it was about 1980. It was going to be my first trip to America on holiday. Never been there before.
Hmm.
And we moved to America that year. It happened in stages, but reading Fitzpatrick's book and the journey of leaving Ireland very quickly after that made me hanker for the
Hmm.
story of my own country. It's like, it's a
Hmm.
paradox. Wait a minute. You're leaving the bloody place. It's America that should be the focus, right? Nope. I get the America physically. Yes. But my focus is backward looking. And I'm going, what is this place I just came from? How do I know so little about it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm very similar, funnily enough. I used to live in England for a bit and then out in Australia. I recently moved home. And part
Hmm.
of the reasons was just the call to come back here to learn about it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, yeah.
Well, it took me like that. So it was kind of reverse, And then so I just picked up a couple of other books. Nothing, I thought the books were good. Story of the Irish Race and Celtic Myth and Legend, still have those books today, and dived more deeply into it 1980. And so there was a kind of a learning curve between that year and then 82, moving into 83, where we'd come back to Ireland for a while. And so that was a very pivotal time for that. And it turned out also supplementary to that was that uh, at San Francisco radio at the time, we were living in the Bay Area, you see, San Francisco radio had a station that on Saturdays would play Irish music.
Right, right.
Yeah, totally did not know that this was going to
Very good.
happen as well. And
Yeah,
so I tuned into that purely by accident. A friend had given a big ghetto blaster to me, so I was always on it.
brilliant.
And found this station, this radio station, Can't tell you who it was or what it was, but and would assiduously, and then I started to even record a little bit of the music, you know. That's when
Hmm.
I found out about Shauna Ryder and, the people like the Clancy Boys and the Furies and of course the Dubliners, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and Clonard and all that. So I was starting listening to that. So that was another sort of then the background to these studies. So that's how it happened.
yeah.
And
Very good.
it started back then that wouldn't mature until about 2009 when I start seriously, I think it was about 2007 I started writing the Irish Origins. I put up the website, and then about 2 years after that came out the book, The Irish Origins of Civilization. So there was that long of a study.
Wow.
Yeah, so and then the book was so thick, it had to be made into 2 volumes, and then that still wasn't good enough, so basically volume 3 is on the website as a series of appendix pages. There's no other way to do it.
Fantastic.
It was just too mammoth. So there's 2 books, volume 1 and volume 2, and then there's a volume 3, but it's in, internet form. And in fact, it's free. People can just go to the website and look at all the appendix pages there. There's quite a few of them. If they're not interested in buying the book, they can look at and deal with that thesis. I'm sure you and I will talk about it. A very unusual, controversial thesis that is certainly not popular. And unless you know the right authors of the past, many decades ago, maybe centuries ago even, who wrote about this, it would come as a complete shock. It's totally against the grain of any kind of mainstream thought regarding the role of Ireland in world history.
Hmm. Yeah, it's massive. And so was originally mythology and sort of the study of mythology and of Irish mythology that got you onto this then with it. And
It was the way Fitzpatrick put it that
yeah.
a numbskull like me could identify with it and then go more into serious works, which would have been kind of off putting.
Hmm.
But he lit the fuse. I did later talk to him. He gave me permission to use one of his pieces of artwork for a cover of my first book. My Atlantis book has a cover. That's Jim Fitzpatrick painted it, and he very generously. This is a man who
Fantastic.
charges hundreds of thousands of dollars for his work. He gave me free opportunity to use multiple images. I tell you, that is a super privilege because he certainly doesn't allow that to anybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great
Exactly
man.
it.
He did all the Thin Lizzy covers.
Ah, right. Yes,
So if
yes.
anybody's into metal, they'd know. Of course, he's done more than that. He's a very, very famous artist. He's like a kind of an Andy Warhol of Ireland.
Hmm.
But he did most of the Thin Lizzy covers. He was a very close friend of Phil Lynott and the boys from Brand Downey and all of them from Thin Lizzy. So that was another tie-in
Hmm.
that was special. He's a very special man. So that was a good way to sort of kick it off, actually. It was a little bit, good to have that privilege. So did the Atlantis book in 2000, and the Irish Origins, as I say, was out in the public by 2009. But it's had several updates since then. I would recommend the Kindle. I would not recommend anybody trying to buy anything but the official Kindle book because my books were all pirated, sadly. So that's a
One of the
doggy.
downsides of the internet.
Yeah, it happens to a lot of authors. But, that's the internet, yeah, but if they go to Amazon, the official links from my website will take you right to the Kindle book, and then you're on. Then you're good. You're good. You're sorted.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. And so, oh yeah, we'll have to do maybe an episode just going into that by itself about this Irish origins of civilization. And
That's
I'm
right.
sure we could do an episode in each one of your books because they span such a different broad range of categories from philosophy to psychology to all sorts of what may be deemed like alternative research or what some might say or conspiracy theories or these kind of loaded terms. And so I guess I just wanted to sort of take a macro view of everything to step back and um, sort of understand where you're really coming from and the structure behind it, because the name of your podcast itself is Unslaved, and so I wonder what you mean by the term unslaved. First off, maybe we could chat about that and why you chose that specifically for your podcast name.
Yeah, I was very, very, very influenced by this 1960s series, The Prisoner. Are you familiar with that?
I've seen some of it with it. This is your man with a number, is it? And
Yes, that's right.
the you and yes, yes, yes,
And Patrick McGoohan, who created it from scratch and
yes.
acted and produced it, was Irish. He's an Irishman. He's passed away now, sadly. It came out in 1965, and it ran, and I've seen the replays of it or whatever, down through the years, and the
Hmm.
DVDs which are available, and that was very, very impactful. Not that I understood it, but very few people do. It's actually quite surreal, but they love it. The fans love it, even though it takes time to unpack what is actually going on in this show, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those great sci-fi type shows. I was addicted to it and other sci-fi programs. That's where basically Unslaved came from,
Hmm.
and we just had the idea to then make it into a podcast
Yeah,
in
brilliant.
2016.
Hmm.
And I had the website before that for many years, and
Hmm.
we adapted it, repurposed it to do our own podcast because you see, all my accounts, YouTube,
Mm.
Facebook, were all canceled. I was one of the earliest people to be shadow banned and then completely deplatformed, and no reasons given or anything like that.
Yeah.
So there was just no alternative. It wasn't
Hmm.
even something planned. In fact, I would say almost everything in my life wasn't planned.
It can be serendipitous, and you look back on it, it all has a reason to it in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so. And this was part of it. It wasn't planned.
Yeah.
So there really was no choice. It was, the time had come to charge and to make a paywall and to go private, if at all, because if we didn't do that, then there was nothing. We
Yeah.
would have been completely shut down, as I was.
Yeah.
Multiple accounts were lost. I was trolled and flagged. And that was only the beginning of the problem, because I was also attacked by right-wing Christians for many years, who attacked me and nobody else. People were
Yeah.
doing way more controversial things, and they were getting off the hook. And all I was doing in my programs was expressing
Mm.
opinion. No, wait. I wasn't even doing that. I was expressing the work of other people.
Yeah.
And I was attacked as if these are my bona fide ideas. Like, I believe in the ideas I was espousing. When any
Mm.
fool can see, the series I
Mm.
did that got attacked was, none of the ideas were mine.
Hmm.
I was relaying ideas from all sorts of different teachers, schools of thought. And yet I was personally, ad hominem attacked. I just couldn't
Hmm.
believe it. It's like, if you're going to attack me for my own ideas, and then we'll discuss it. But don't attack me for just broadcasting
Yes.
ideas of other people on all a variety of subjects. But because a lot of it was on astrotheology, remember that Zeitgeist film was out?
Yes, I remember watching that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this was the
Extraordinary.
era in which there was a lot of backlash, and a lot of it was from right-wing Christians who were the stupidest people you could ever imagine to encounter. But we had freedom of speech, and we had internet, and we had, the way they could go after you for
Yes.
whatever reason. And so I had to also deal with that as well. So there was just a lot of issues, um, which could have easily shut you down, said, oh, well, nobody wants to, nobody deserves to go through this. So, but I was very persistent. And then we had the option of creating Unslaved. So we went down that route, for a while.
Yeah. Very, very glad you did.
Yeah.
I've greatly enjoyed it for many years, and I guess one of the things about it is you were able to curate your own audience of people who can really dive into it and can really follow it with it. And like one of the great things you do is you coalesce the work of so many great minds that have come before you with it, and you're really able to communicate that to so many different types of people. And you always bring the receipts. And when people go to criticize something, you're like, well, if I'm referencing one of the great geniuses of the past, your arguments with them in a way. You know, you're just we're just the messenger in some ways. You know what I mean? And
I'm so
yeah,
glad you
yeah,
pointed that out, because that is in fact true, and so this is what's lost in the mist when people just fixate, and they do it today. We know it as trolling.
mm,
It's ignorance. It's they don't know where the ideas come from, even though you're quite clear at expressing it.
mm-hmm,
So they kill the messenger. Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah, yeah, and it's an emotional reaction to it, which goes towards so many of the other things. It's emotionally what you said. I guess is the truth, and I guess it's because it's the truth. It triggers something within them, and then they hate out at that. They lash out at that because they've spent their whole lives sort of repressing it. And there's all these different mechanisms that they've built up, and then whenever somebody comes along to say it with it, but then you just become the vessel that they can sort of project on to attack. And I
Yeah.
guess this,
No, there's
yeah,
no doubt about that. There's no doubt
yeah,
about that particular dynamic for some strange reason. And they do
mm,
it to some and they don't do it to others. And the funny thing is they leave people alone who are talking worse garbage than you can imagine. The ones that they should be going after, they leave alone. And the ones who've got, as you say, the receipts, they go
yeah,
after. So
yeah,
it's utterly paradoxical. It actually did make me think more in conspiratorial terms
yeah,
that there was an agenda behind it because so many losers in this movement were being let free,
yeah, yeah,
and had not a single bit of pushback, even though they're charlatans, charging people millions of dollars, right? Absolutely. And getting
yeah.
away with it.
It's outrageous.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
there's people out there robbing their
Hmm.
public, selling them junky ideas and all sorts of things, and they got scot free. They were loved. They were hailed.
Oh yeah.
Trumpets blowing and all. And I'm just over here in the corner doing my thing, and getting just lashed, by these unknowns
Yeah.
for
And
years.
it's great you said it was coming from the right wing Christians there in this instance, because I think people are so used to saying us the left now. It's the left that are cancelling everyone. It's the left that have lost their mind. But it's equal. It's not partisan. It's both sides. Oh, it's the left and the right.
Yeah,
They're both enemies of the truth. As long
yeah.
as you sort of confine yourself into some little ideology, that's what they're going to stick to, and that's who the group they belong to. And to see if an individual that stands outside of that with it, well, he's the one that's sort of that they pivot themselves off of, and that they can put all their hate onto.
So I don't understand it, and the way it shaped, the way it came at me was very unusual. I got my own back at the end, but because remember, victory is the greatest revenge.
Yeah,
Or success is the greatest revenge. Just
yeah,
keep stepping. But it was paradoxical. They shouldn't have been coming after me at all.
yeah.
So it was something like a madness, a frenzy, a
Mhm,
monomania.
mhm.
And yeah, my forums got slammed, and trolled out of existence and things like that. But in a way, it just forced me behind the wall. It said, right, we'll do it for members only then. There was always a way out, so they pushed me to be more selective
Mhm.
and to come off social media almost
Yeah,
entirely, and
yeah,
I never
yeah.
missed it. But you're right. Recently, I opened a Substack because of the last book. I have 14 books, and the last one, the 14th, I
Mm.
decided to put on Substack. So it was a little bit of a change just to make it available there exclusively for a while. So that's why we did that. But there's other posts and other notes on. I can always send you the link, directly to that book on Substack later. You can present it for people if you want.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll put everything, and then if you want to send me an email just with like all the little bits, I'll add it on to the bottom of this, and then yeah, just to get a bit further into our discussion then. So we started off with talking about mythology and about, how you came across this different, I guess, perspective on the origin of civilization. And then this broadened out into a much greater thing about, I guess, alternative research or conspiracy theories. What's this is such a loaded term, and it's such a pejorative that's thrown around, and it's just to create a sort of a bad smell near anybody that if you go to listen to them, oh no, you just should immediately react to it with it. But what's your understanding of what the term conspiracy theory means, really?
Well, yeah, good question. I think that I would look at it more in legalistic criminal terms.
Mm,
There are criminal conspiracies, and that's accepted by detectives and people in the law enforcement. So that's where it actually comes from.
mm-hmm,
And there can be no doubt that it exists on multiple levels from the criminal up. So you're just taking a concept that's quite ordinary and
mm-hmm,
understandable in terms of, sort of street level criminal consortiums
mm-hmm,
and gangland associations and mafioso type affairs, right? And then you're really enlarging it. And of course, if that's done with proof, we're
mm-hmm,
good. If it's done with some boogaloo channeling baloney,
mm-hmm.
and that's still around, believe you me, I would say that about 80% of this movement is full of shit like that. So I don't wonder that it
Yeah,
gets a bad name. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
One of the most common things I've ever experienced in this work is that when people come across my work, they immediately say, I was wrong, Michael, because when I checked out your work, I had this idea it was all woo-woo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for showing me I definitely know you're not part of that. So that's been openly accepted and openly admitted by many because they're put off, and they're right to be put off because there are so many charlatans. I don't even want to
Hmm.
mention names, but oh my God,
Yeah.
they're in their hundreds, if not even thousands, of the charlatans, who are in this field, and these channelers and all sorts of, types. So it gets, yeah, but if you're coming at it with experts, that have written on this,
Yeah.
you're on stronger ground. Now, that doesn't mean that you accept some of these experts wholesale. Some of them have got errors
Hmm.
as well, but that's a separate subject. Once you get into them, then you can, go through it with a fine-tooth comb. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, there are some brilliant names out there that you need to know about. Professor Anthony Sutton, Dr. John Coleman, and others like that, G. Edward Griffin,
Yeah.
and many others I could mention. The great Avro Manhattan, I mean, almost
Hmm.
top of the list, So once you've got these greats, they will
Hmm.
convince you utterly that, there is such a thing as a conspiracy, and it's very, very deep.
Yeah.
And so that got me hooked. When I read some, I had good discernment. I was pretty much able to see right from the start what books were rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I got into it about 1990.
Mm.
Conspiracy, because when another trip to America, the longest one, I would stay for about 20 years. That opened in that late 89. And by
Hmm.
90, I was hanging out with somebody who was bringing me conspiracy books.
Mm.
I'd never heard of them or seen anything like this before. And he was bringing them into me because he was in doubt about whether he should read them or not. So he'd give them to me, we'd read the back,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I would just go, "Are you fucking serious?" Right? Typical Irish, right? Attitude. I would just curse it out, and I go, "Fucking throw that away," right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But every so often, rarely, but every so often, he'd come into work in the morning with a book that was a marvel, you know. But being American, he had no clue about continental or British history. Of course, I do know.
Yeah.
So when it was your books like Webster Tarpley, the ones who were writing about British history, I could tell this is fucking garbage or this is true. But some American
Yeah.
writers having you on, right? And I would say, throw
Hmm.
that away. That's a lot of lies. But
Hmm.
he'd bring in other ones that maybe were talking about the history of the British royal family, which he knew nothing about, but I did.
Mm.
And the various histories of whatever. And I'm going, whoa, 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 stop. Who wrote this? What? You know? And then over the years, we'd make a collection. You see, we'd get the books that were of this apex level, this platinum fucking deal, and we go to bookstores all over the Bay Area and get them and order them. Yeah. And so we assembled a library of the greatest, the best of the best. First
Mm.
of all, learning it for ourselves.
Mm.
This is where you come across your Ralph Eppersons and all these masters,
Yeah.
and many were Christians who didn't agree with everything they had to say, but the work that they were doing was scintillating in other ways. And I give total respect to that, and so it was a slow process.
Hmm.
Yeah, into the conspiracy. So then when you speak about it, you have authority and quote from these greats. I think then you're on stronger ground. And it's, as we know, then at that point, yeah, things take on
Hmm.
a different angle than just when you're running around like some lunatic in the streets, pointing over the hill, going, it's them, it's them, it's them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that got me onto your work. Like and anybody young person that goes through the education system, you sort of come out the other side and like, you've been lied to, right? There's a lie. You've been lied to, whether it's from the media, whether it's from the politicians, whether it's from the institutions, whether it's seeing, injustice in the so-called justice system. But where do you turn to? Where do you turn to find out what the truth is? Who's really going to tell you the lie? If everybody's lied to you so far, how can you discern who the truth teller is? And one of the people I think, well, probably one of the most famous so-called conspiracy theorists or alternative researchers is David Icke, who I believe you used to, I believe you know him, you've met him a few times, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think it was one of his presentations that I'd seen. Um, so much of it I really liked, so much of it I loved. I'd love to actually chat to him at some time about it. But there were certain things where I couldn't go, oh, I can prove this or I can prove that. I know exactly where his source is for this. And so without that, I couldn't take the next step of saying, oh, definitely, this is what the truth is, and this is where the lie is. And I remember he had referenced, I could be wrong, but I think he had referenced two people at the end of one of his presentations, so where he got a lot of his information from. One was yourself, and one was Ralph Ellis. And so I go, well, if this is who's David Icke's learning from, this is who I have to go and learn from too. And
I
that's why I
see.
went to go check out your work.
Yeah, I know he mentioned me in one of the early books, but in the beginning when I was contributing to his work, I told
Mm,
him then verbatim I did not want to be mentioned by name.
right,
It wasn't out of
right.
fear. It was out of a not wanting to be known in the public. I had no interest in that at the time.
Understandable.
This was around about 1999. I have a letter from him, so it would be dated, but it's in the storage. I don't have it in front of me,
Yeah,
where he
yeah.
was thanking me for sending him loads of stuff, But in his correspondence, when I talked to him, and he also has friends that were friends of mine that they introduced my work to him. So we had these people in common.
Hmm.
And so he did mention me as being his Irish friend in in The Biggest Secret,
Very good.
whose mother was a clairvoyant and so on, so on, so on. He described it, but he didn't mention me by
Yeah,
name. And that was fine at the time. I didn't want that.
yeah, yeah.
So, we have different lines of research, though. I think
Hmm.
there's lots of areas of his work that I don't subscribe to anymore, but that's
Fair enough.
inevitable. That's it. That totally
Let's
is
see with everyone.
inevitable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there was somebody else. His name slips my mind at the moment, but it was a topic. It was about the occult, and the occult's one of these things that people hear about, and you hear written in different books, and you've maybe seen it in films or tangential references to it in different areas. But if you'd really ask people what is the occult, as an occult historian yourself, how would you describe what the occult is, and how would you introduce somebody to this?
Yeah, well, that's a huge question, but
Mm,
obviously the word just means hidden.
yeah.
And originally it referred to astrology and to stars that would rise above the horizon and set, and that would go, or eclipses, right? In which one planet would be occulted. So this is where it
Yeah.
sort of came from. So it really has a very ordinary generic meaning of being concealed. But in the
Mm-hmm.
terms that we are using it, it represents that which has been hidden from the public, and an awful lot has been hidden from the public. Now, my researches in the end start getting into the psychology of things, which is where I believe the most hidden things are. But the way I would look at it is also, yes, there's a hidden hand out there
Mm-hmm.
that hides things from us, but that's easier to do if we've also got cognitive dissonance
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a penchant for dissociation. Then we're aiding and abetting, right? So in other words, somebody could put something in front of you and you wouldn't see it. It's like hidden in plain
Yeah.
sight.
Yeah.
So in my work, there's an emphasis on, yes, there's definitely a hidden hand that's concealing shit from you, but
Mm-hmm.
there's also weird editing capacities that we have that we don't know about
Mm,
that aid and abet the puppeteers.
yeah.
And so the real occult is this dual aspected thing in which, yes, it's a learning curve, in which you learn the techniques of manipulation and persuasion from the other, but it's
Mm,
also deeply psychological in which you have to self-actualize. Now, this is where the sheep get separated from the fucking goats in this movement, because a
mm,
lot of people will do the first because this is, becomes a hobby, becomes interesting.
mm-hmm.
I want to beat up on somebody. So it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be the Illuminati today, or the Jews, or the Jesuits, or whatever, and people live a whole life there. Atheists beat up on believers, believers beat up on atheists, right? While all of this Tweedledee, Tweedledum stuff is going on,
Mm-hmm.
no one is doing the second part, which is dealing with the psyche. No one. And this includes people like David Icke and all, they're novices in this. They're incapable of doing this.
Mm,
Yep. It never enters their minds personally, and they wouldn't know where to start.
yeah.
So this was then a thing that I thought, my God, what the hell is going on here? Haven't they read the Edward Bernays'? Haven't they read the Hidden Persuaders, the Herbert Marcuse's, and people like that? The puppeteers are working on our psyche. Like I said, haven't they watched The Prisoner and shows like that? That have made this abundantly clear, and movies like The Agency and Equilibrium, and I mean, it's even on big screen TVs. The big movies have even whistleblown this fact. And yeah, so there's something in our own eye, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
that also prevents us seeing
Mm-hmm.
the truth. So this is a very dual aspected thing. You have to do both at the same time. Now that's a lot of energy for most people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Beating up on the Illuminati or the whoever, right? The external threat and uncovering what they're doing. Yeah, that's fascinating. It needs to be done, and it is interesting, and I appreciate the people who do it. But it is only 50. As I've argued this from book one, and this
Yeah.
is why even from my very first book, which is on Atlantis and related things, but it's deeply into the occult. That book really goes into the hidden conspiracy in a very deep way. Already my paths were already divided from people like David Icke and others right from the very first book. Wasn't planned, but obviously my researchers took me in a totally different direction.
And one of the people that I'd come across as a teacher before, and I heard you reference him, was the great Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I remember he was somebody who speaks about what the truth is, and he does it in an incredibly unique way where people should 100% go look up his talks online. But I remember him saying once that in order to understand the truth, which is a pathless land, as he described it, in order to go very far, sometimes you've got to start from very close. And one of the interesting things you'd mentioned about like what's hidden in front of our faces, like as an example of this, um, like for example, how we create our reality. You can see your nose all of the time. It's just that your mind edited it out, so it's not really obstructing your view. But I remember when I was a wee boy, strangely, I just noticed it once, and I couldn't get rid of it for weeks. And so it's one of these things like that which is closest to you can be hardest to see. And so it's all well and good to have, talks about conspiracies and the Illuminati and the Freemasons and so on and so forth. Or when you mentioned that other half of where you have, there is a hidden hand. It does manipulate people. One of the ways it does that is through psychology and of manipulating the psyche. How else would it be done? But people don't want to do the work in regards to that. And so if you were trying to describe how people's psyches are enslaved or what the psyche is, would you riff on that for a little minute of how you sort of think that works?
Well, first I want to address what you just said there about the glasses on
Mhm.
your face or the nose on your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, the philosopher Heidegger called it the distancing of the nearest. And I've also used the term invisible bias proximity. And this amounts because my latest book was on existentialism, which is a philosophy. And this is actually quite a large part of that philosophy, it turns out, what you're hitting on here. This phenomena that the pedals on the car, the handle of the door, the seat you're sitting on, it's all invisible. And almost everything that we call consciousness, we're not really conscious of in any
Hmm.
kind of way. We're deluded by our own language. We're
Hmm.
self-deceived. There's so much around us, the colors, right? I mean, you wouldn't believe what's around us that we're not even consciously aware of, but we think we are. So there's a whole, conversation one can have about that. And as I said, this has been used by the hidden persuaders, this tunnel vision. Now, of course, somebody would argue, but we need to be like that because it is the tunnel vision, the ability to be able to exclude that we
Hmm.
focus and get things done. Hey, and I totally accept that. Of course it is. But that
Hmm.
still doesn't mean that you can't be aware of your ignorance. Like Socrates said, that I know nothing, right? You must at least be conscious of that which you're not conscious of. I know it sounds paradoxical,
Hmm.
but this is how, the higher awakened person gets it. Now, Krishnamurti, this is Jiddu Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti, is probably one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived. And you're right. And he always maintained, like you just said, he would illustrate that, look, worry not about the end of the goal, the goal, worry about the first step. Because in the first step is the ending. And people couldn't get any of this. It was too simple. It was too zen. But the main thing what he was, I'm so glad you brought him up because there's not many people like him. He
Hmm.
was a deconstructionist in the sense of he believed in apophatic learning, which is
Hmm.
what's actually science is allegedly meant to be doing, right? Too, by the way, but whether it does it or not is arguable. But the real
Mhm.
thing is to break down, right? To be able to dismiss that which is false. And he said that once the false is seen as false, the truth stands forth. Now, there's a lot of truth in that, because what he's really saying is that the truth does not require effort.
Mhm.
Now, wait a minute. What? We must have missed that one, because look at the effort that everybody's putting in with their paths and their techniques, and their science and the amount of mental energy that is invested. You
Mhm.
see the whole Yang approach. He laughed at that. He said, "You'll never get the truth that way. It's more elusive. It's all around you. It's there, right in front of you. But
Truth
you've got
is.
to deconstruct all the lies that you've built up."
Mhm.
Now, that to me was very profound. I was in Krishnamurti work, when I was a child.
Mhm.
People in my family had gone to his schools in India. I mean, we grew up in that tradition. So this was something that was always in the background until then. Later, I start personally reading him, and wow, he came at a very
Mhm.
important time in my life, because believe you me, I was ready to be going down some very, very wrong paths.
Mhm.
Gnosticism and other things related to that.
Yeah.
And he threw the bucket of, he gave me that squeegee for the third eye that Bill Hicks talks about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're quite right there. Yeah, this when it comes to what the psyche is, the psyche is all things. Consciousness itself is anything you say of it. This is the most extraordinary thing. And to say anything about the mind is to use the mind, right? To describe the psyche, what it is and what it isn't, we're using the psyche. We're using the mind. So wait a minute. Before you even set out on the journey, you've got this extraordinary paradox to deal with, this problem. It's the mind thinking about itself. Well, that implies two minds, not one. A monad, a unity couldn't do that. There has to be a dualism, a primal dualism involved, and what we could call then a dialectic or a dialogue between two sides, a listener and a speaker and a listener.
Mm.
So the thing becomes much more complicated. And so there are certain philosophers like Krishnamurti and others, and the German Fichte, Johann Fichte, who then made, and others, of course, who made a big deal about this. They were, today you have somebody like Ian McGilchrist, who's making a big deal about this. He describes it more in neurological terms of the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and that's fine. I'm totally into that, right? Because at least they're making this point of this primal underlying, what I call contrarium, that exists. So consciousness is not a unity.
Mm.
And if you've got a duad, how do we know it's not a triad? How do we know
Mhm.
it's not a quaternity? Then you say, hold on, the alchemists did say it was a quaternity. The ancient astrologers thought it was a quaternity. Carl Jung thought it was a quaternity. The Christian theologians thought it was a quaternity. William Blake speaks of it as a quaternity. Hold on, we started with one thing, now we got four?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, other people are configuring it as a triad. Then somebody's talking about a quintessence that implies a fifth element. I mean, come on. Then some of the Eastern Hindu paths have 7 centers. The Kabbalists have 10 centers and more. I mean, wait a frickin' minute. You see, so what it really means is that this thing, consciousness, is a very, very plastic thing.
Mm.
But I just like to stick with the simplest explanation. This
Mm.
thing speaks of its own self. The self is self-reflective. The mind, we need the mind to speak of what the mind is.
Mhm.
And this is then mystery number 1. So when they say there's no mystery in the world, materialist, reductionist,
Mhm.
these are the most shallow people. All they do is they explain things away.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's all they have. Actually, all they do, these materialist reductionists. And that's why they have so much fallout. That's why, from even within the corridors of their own institutions, there's a lot of dissent now. Because people understand some of what I've said, and they go, this reductionism won't work for me, and I'm not going to go along with it. There is something centrally mysterious about the mind that no scientists can explain. This, paradoxicon, this consciousness is commenting on itself. How can it even do that? It's totally paradoxical and therefore mysterious. So what do we know about it? What can we do about it? Well, what they do about it is forget that it exists and don't talk about it and find something else to do.
Yeah. Anything other than that, anything other than looking at themselves, Yeah.
But the mystic will not do that. The mystic sticks closely to that mystery and always keeps it in sight.
Mm,
The consciousness is like a mirror, specular, and when I look into it, lots of strange, mysterious things are taking place. It's looking into itself.
mm,
But how is that even possible? So if
mhm,
I got one mystery and I hold on to that for dear life and don't let it go, maybe there's another mystery. Because if I found one, how do I know there's not others? And that's the journey of the Siddhartha Road. That's the mystical journey. Now you're really dealing with, it's like the psyche is, sort of seducing you forward.
mhm,
You're initiated now. The mystery's
mhm,
called you. And now you'll never be the same. You'll never be wanting to listen to any of these detractors and materialists anymore. You'll hear what they
mhm,
say, yes, but you're not going to be influenced by it
mhm,
because you have been, bitten by the greater numinous mystery, what
mhm,
Rudolf Otto called the numinous.
mhm.
And it won't be so easy to, go back to live with the chickens again.
You mentioned the mystic. Will you speak a bit more about the mystic and the role of the mystic in society and what sort of journey the mystic goes on? You said the Siddhartha Road or Siddhartha Path. Can you speak a wee bit more about that?
Well, yes. See, in existentialistic terms, right, he's the outsider. He's been known as the
Mm,
outsider. And what does that mean, and all the rest of it. So a being, we're talking about a divided being, contrarians and things like that. But probably the best way to put this is that man is actually a trinity. In the
mm,
existential concept, he's what's known as Umwelt, Mitwelt, and Eigenwelt. I'll explain
mm,
what they mean.
mhm,
Eigenwelt comes from the word self. Eigen, weld, world. So the self world, that's one circle. Interlocking with that is Mitwelt, which means with world, with others, the society, culture. And so those two circles interlock. And then the third circle is Umwelt, which means the around world or nature. So immediately in existential philosophy, if you're talking about a human being, you're speaking about a trinity, an existential trinity of these interlocking parts. Now, if you're too much in the Eigenwelt, then you're just one of these solipsistic people, might even be a narcissist if it gets too bad, but at least your focus is mostly self-absorbed into you and yours.
mm,
If you're too lost in the Mitwelt, then you're a social creature, a political creature, an extrovert and sensationalist, and possibly if it's bad, you'll be a hysterical type of person, like you get all these snowflakes today running around, right? And your entire world is just the world of other people and the circus. If you are Umwelt focused, then none of that matters, and you're just sort of living in a cabin in the woods.
mhm,
Or you're one of these characters living on the banks of the Ganges. That's your solution. Get the fuck away from people, become a hermit, become austere,
mhm,
run away to the mountains or to a monastery,
mhm,
and contemplate your navel and all. And just, you can, the hippies tried to do that. They tried to sort of hug trees and go,
yeah,
roll around in the mud. And there was this fake interest in the natural world. We still get it today in the ecology movement. That's what they're about. That's what their roots are. So each one of these circles has an imbalance. And,
mhm,
when they come to, so the existential psychologist is trying to treat you as a trinity, but find out where your imbalances
mm,
are. Hey, you're not paying any attention to the natural world around you. It's your Umwelt sphere that needs to be brought into balance. Hey, you never
mm,
think about yourself. You're so lost in the world of other people. So Eigenweld is where our therapy is going to work with you. Or your Midweld is broken down because you were hurt in life by parents and girlfriends or teachers. So you've just shut off from other people. You're too Eigenweld. You're not enough Midweld, So let's work on that. Have more faith in people. Be a little bit more social. You see, so this is how they'd work it.
mm.
And there's some existentialists who even believe there's a fourth circle, dealing with a different dimension, which would be the spiritual dimension, and that's fine too. But the outsider is someone who is, in a way, a mystic who has kind of said, I am looking for that other dimension. I've got these other things in balance, or I've understood their essence. I've understood the essence of these things, but I feel even a deeper calling. And the way that some of the existential writers talked about it is that they just don't feel at home in any of those places for one reason or another. They don't feel at home in themselves. They don't feel at home in society with other people. And they don't even feel at home really in the world, in nature. Maybe to an extent. And you get these sort of Nietzsche-like characters who are restless, who don't feel at home even in their own skin. And of course you have a pathological version of that as well. We call them schizophrenics. But no. Although the outsider may toy with insanity, he's not really insane. He's a mystic. He's on the Siddhartha road. He's looking for that which is, beyond the reach of his fellows. And you get some wonderful movies that have gone into this. And you get some wonderful stories, by the existentialists. And so then, now somebody like Krishnamurti comes along and says, truth is a pathless land and cannot be approached by any path whatsoever. He's speaking to the outsider. Because when he said those words, he dissolved the Theosophical Society. He dissolved not just them, but he dissolved all. He wanted to see the dissolution of all religions and all schools and traditions. Because as he was addressing the man on the Siddhartha road saying, and that way, that path is yours and yours alone. But do you have the courage to walk it? No one's gone ahead of you. It's like the chariot card in the tarot. No one's gone ahead of you. You are the rider. You have to thrash through those forests. And the way, like the Fool card, opens up as you walk. There is no path. Krishnamurti said, the truth is a pathless land. I don't think that's ever sunk into people's heads. The Theosophical people got very upset when he said it. And it split them into those who went with Krishnamurti and others who just stuck to the old, the old way. But all his life, he never flinched from that. So it really, the long-winded way to answer your question is that the outsider is the man who makes his own path. William Blake said, if I do not create my own path, I'll be enslaved by the path of somebody else. Or the system, he meant the system of somebody else. Yeah. And all of us face this.
Yeah.
Now, in the beginning, you may need direction. It's perfectly normal, right? But later on, as you mature, you've got to carve your own way out. And that means a new relationship with Umwelt, a new relationship with Mitwelt, and a new relationship with the Eigenwelt. So it doesn't mean leaving those things. It doesn't mean abandoning them. As I argue in my book, it's the way of seeing. It's not the doing of the thing, it's how you do it. This is where authenticity comes in. But that's a very misunderstood word.
Yeah.
Sometimes people want to make too large changes when it's actually a very nuanced thing. It's actually a very simple reorientation in your way of seeing is what makes you authentic, not some big fashion fucking statement.
Not your blue hair.
Certainly not any of that. That's the height of inauthenticity, actually.
And so, yeah, there's sort of two ways you can go to know that you're on the path, I guess. One way is to choose to reject it and say, I'm going to be part of the lie. I'm going to go with the group, whatever the group says. My opinion, my feelings, my perspective, they're all secondary. I've learned to push them down or to not to trust them. Whereas your other path is a following of the truth and it's living authentically. How do you know when you're walking on the right path?
Well, you never really do because it's opening up as you go.
Yeah.
And you are the one who decides. This is where your free will, comes in. This is where your deeper voice, your conscience comes in. The other paths which are formulaic they give you a certain kind of certainty, which most people say, that's good enough for me. I'll be corralled by that. See, the thing that's why there's so few mystics in the world and plenty of conformists is because this other path that we're talking about is difficult, and you won't be able to do it without a lot of ability to, I'm thinking here, see, in terms of even physical energy, my mind goes to people like Wilhelm Reich. You need to be able to tap into the inner source of vital energy.
Mm,
Yeah, you won't even make it unless you can really muster the physical life force
mm,
to persevere against the obstacles that are not going to come toward you. It's like playing a video game, they're just going to throw everything at you. So you need a lot of vital energy. You can't be a weak soul and hope to make
mm,
any progress. So that would be the physical side of it. To keep your body and your health together, would
mm,
be an enormous part. Then on top of that, once that's sorted, then you'd have to be okay with this sort of spontaneity and flexibility. But even more so is then you have to awaken conscience, which is different than superego. All right. Yeah, there's a big difference here. There's actually two moral centers. We talked earlier about the consciousness splitting into two in order
yeah.
to function. Well, this is also backed up by the fact that really, as we develop as children, there's two moral centers, and they're
Mm-hmm.
quite different. People don't realize this. One
Mm-hmm.
generates guilt, and another generates shame. And
Right.
the two are so similar that we know most people today have no clue what you're talking about. They couldn't tell the difference between the two at all, right? But in psychology, they matter a lot.
Mm,
And the shame comes from the conscience, and the guilt comes from the superego. And both are needed. You can't get rid of one and leave and only have the other. You need both of them, but you need them again in the right balance.
yeah.
Now, on the Siddhartha road, the outsider needs to awaken his conscience. Let's say this is where you get into values and good and evil,
Mm,
because the conscience will have now its own moral structure that could be very, very different, you see, than the people around you. You may have to fall in love with the word no.
mm,
You may have to set more boundaries than you've done before. You may have to use your will and your desire, in a different way. And all of these things, and also there may be a lot of abandoning of certain
mm,
ways of being, and certain friends and certain approaches as well. All a lot of hard work. So that's what I would say about that is, now, it's not that you can't find pointers. You just mentioned Krishnamurti. I mean, yeah, you should read his work, should listen to him. You'll get some pointers from him and other wise souls out there, right? But as I said,
mm,
there's a lot of fucking charlatans as well,
yeah.
espousing a lot of lies. How can we tell the truth from the good? Well, that's where people like me come in. I'm not boasting. I'm just saying that this is where, because we've done the 30, 40 years of work. And
Mm,
hopefully if people are into our work, that will assist them in
mm,
being directed towards only the best of the best, with warnings about, oh, this guy's really good, but there's a few things over here that, you got to watch out for. That's what I do.
yeah. Yeah. You do superbly as well.
The best I
And
can.
this sort of it sort of goes back to the beginning of saying like, okay, you're born, you're brought up into society. Um, we sort of said, listen, we know we're being lied to, we know the institutions lie to you, so on and so forth. And then it comes to, you're trying to understand the truth and who do you turn to. And I guess one of the ways to live this authentic life, of to go down this Siddhartha road of trying to find the truth and to follow that path, it comes with an understanding of how to understand the truth. And meaning, the better we can know ourselves, the better we know how we lie to ourselves and how we sort of create our own illusions, the better we can be at directing ourselves towards what the truth is. And so this is why we study psychology. And I guess this is part of the reason why you got so into it originally. And so let's maybe even just take a macro view. Let's pretend people are sort of coming in for the first time to this. What are the structures of the psyche? You've mentioned two of them already, about being about the conscious, and there's two conscious centers, and this term, the superego, came up. Let's maybe just start from scratch here a little bit. What are the different structures of the psyche, and then let's gain a better understanding of that.
Well, those two are huge right there. And we're speaking Freud here. He was one of the greatest minds
Mm,
that ever lived.
mm,
And he's also been one who's been very, very misrepresented.
mm,
Now, it is true that areas of his work definitely did need to be expanded upon. And one or two things may have been needed to be rejected, but not many. He was actually an absolutely phenomenal genius in terms of thinking. He's one of the people you just have to deal with. And then after him, you have your Carl Jungs, your Otto Ranks, and your Adlers. So each of these people is giving, and there's others, Karen Horney, Erich Fromm, Viktor Frankl, right? Some of the big, big names. Each of these people is taking a piece of Freud and then expanding it in very interesting ways. So this is why it becomes difficult, because there's a lot more. You get into Freud, and then you have to really know about others as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to know about also feminism, twisted and misrepresented a lot of what Freud was doing for their own purposes, right? Now, but to add a little bit more background before I get to the point, Freud himself is only answering or giving greater expansion to previous philosophers. He didn't come out in a puff of smoke from nowhere. His work is very largely based on Schopenhauer, the philosopher, the German philosopher. Carl Jung's work owes a great debt to two men. One is Nietzsche, the German philosopher, and the other is William Blake. And he didn't give as many citations. Freud was much more generous in his citations, admitting openly, you see, where he was, who he liked. Jung was a little bit more egotistical and vain, and was a little shy on, giving citations. Doesn't really take away from his greater work, but at the same time, it's just a small foible that he had. Freud was much more generous and genial and urbane. So it's passing the baton. These ideas were already in the zeitgeist in German philosophy, in Italian philosophy and Platonism years before. But what happened with the Freuds of the world is that they give a new slant, right, which was really needed at the time as well, because the philosophy had become too stodgy, too embedded in the weeds, too difficult, and too abstract. So Freud comes along and sort of takes a meat cleaver, and he pours corrosive on all of this stuff and tries to get at the heart of things. And so now, of course, he was a materialist in his own way to a degree, right? He's a complicated figure, but he did reduce things down to just the sex drive. And he basically understood that, you see, the easiest way, the shorthand to understand Freud is that he thought man was a beast. Yeah. Strip away the socialization, strip away the civilization, and you get nothing but a rapacious, instinctual, lustful, barbarous, hedonistic creature who, if he could, he would just rape and rend from morning till night. Right? He'd be up to his eyeballs in blood, other people's blood, and probably be dead himself very young. That's it. And so his work is therefore to try and describe how the hell then did we get from that to civilization. That's all it is in a nutshell.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yep, it is unbelievable. And then, so he then believes that to get to the next step from what I've just said, he says that obviously that bestial being, the only reason he stops doing what he's doing, there's two reasons. One is that a greater power than him will punish him for his bad deeds. Like a big daddy will punish a child, right? So he's forced from this authority. Higher authorities tell him no. The tribal chief, or, a stronger bully, or something eventually becomes the law. You know what I mean? No, thou shalt not, or a god even. For Freud, God was nothing more than a big thou shalt not sign in the sky. Needed, very needed, but only for infantile type minds. This bestial type of mind, you see, who's incorrigibly uncivilized. Then the second reason why there might be a quelling of the violence is because man is infinitely distractible. Like a string of beads to an ape. Give him some fucking car chases. Give him some love scenes. Give them some football,
Mm-hmm.
right? Give them some 200 channels,
Mm-hmm.
right? And plenty of games and plenty of sweeties. And what happens is he forgets for a minute about clubbing people to death
Mm.
and gets involved temporarily. Freud was a pessimist who said this is only a temporary remedy because eventually we'll have another world war. He used to cringe, when he heard the wheels of the cannon outside his wall as they were marching off to another war. He would cringe. He would shake. Here we go again. So this round of distraction must be continual. We know it today as the media. We know it today as sports. What is 11 guys kicking the shit out of each other with a football? What are you really fucking looking at? So if you look through Freud's eyes, it's war.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is a boxing match? What is wrestling? But when you look through Freud's eyes, then it becomes, what is a game of chess?
Another distraction.
It's another war.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this thing, what he wanted to show in his volume works, is how many shapes and forms this displacement and compensation are the two words he used, how many forms they take. Right? You want to rape and rend all women, but now the society only allows you to marry one. All right. Well, fuck's sake, okay, I guess that's it. But I might do a little bit of, moonlighting after I'm married.
Yeah.
You see? But mostly you go, oh shit, is that all I can get? Yeah. So civilization is a cap,
Mm.
And the structures that you're talking about then are any kind of structure that now is demanded, you see, that the psyche has to, oh shit. So the first structure that comes along is repression. Because the beast, right, the Jekyll and Hyde, Mr. Hyde has to now be suppressed by Dr. Jekyll, part of us. And that means repression. Because otherwise the beast is going to come out at any given moment and all your structures are worthless. Right? So you get repression, and that's then the advent of the superego, part of it. And then you get another one, and another one, and another one, and all the ego structures. His daughter Anna Freud wrote a book called The Ego and Its Defenses, because that's what the ego really is when you break it. Somebody's asked you, what is the ego? Your immediate first response should be a mass of defenses. Defenses to internal content and defenses to external content. Otherwise, you couldn't live. The titanic energies and forces of the external world impeding upon you need to be blocked out for sanity's sake, but there's also titanic forces within, and what he called the id. It's just a German word meaning the it, meaning the unconscious. And Freud was really into that, right? Believing that if you not look out these unconscious forces. Now, this is one of the things, by the way, that would be expanded later on, but in his more narrow way, he just believed, the unconscious is not your friend. It contains a lot of bestial energies. They're bound to burst out. He believed that society will one day inevitably collapse because there'll be this collective, the forces of repression are temporary and weak.
Yeah.
And finally, they'll just turn into putty and bleh. So in his last book that he wrote in 1930 called Civilization and Its Discontents, he said the discontent will win out. Civilization is only a temporary, phenomena, So every time that this looks like there's another Armageddon or a third world war coming, even now you see the craziness in the streets. Freud would not be miffed by that. He would go, it's on its way. Get ready. Any minute now. Any minute now. And actually, to tell you the truth, Carl Jung sort of was along the same lines. If you read some of his other works, we did a 6-part series where we went into depth on this, on Enslaved, and we have it on Carl Jung. We showed all the quotes. Oh yeah, we went into all the quotes that he has on this very similar, almost paralleling what Freud said. Deep pessimism about the future. Offering solutions, yes, but at the same time thinking it can explode at any given fucking moment. These structures that you're talking about are only temporary. They're filters, but they can weaken, they can buckle. And they can also buckle if the Marcusan, Fabian architects of control want them to buckle. manipulate
Mm.
external trauma to precipitate a mental and psychic meltdown, which, I think you'd have to be a fucking lunatic to not believe that that's happening. You'd have to be totally blind, to not know that that's occurring. So again, in comes that aspect, the external and the internal. But
Mhm.
these are massive questions,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you have the Freudian approach. And later on, you've got other guys who take a little bit different tack on that because it's not as serious. They're more positive. But yeah, strictly speaking, Freud was a pessimist
Mm.
who believed that all these structures are just temporary selves. This bestial thing can only temporarily be either you'll stop it because you'll be punished by a more powerful jackboot, or the endless distractions have to be continually increased. Look at VR today. Look at AI today, right? You see, that's what's happening. They're ramping up the bots, right?
Yeah.
You can have a sex doll. You can play video games from morning to night. You can get on your phone. What is all of that if not distraction? Because the distracted person isn't out there killing somebody,
Mm.
right? He's not giving in to his instincts because he's literally distracted. And that's Freud in a nutshell, right there. Freud never changed his outlook through the whole of his life.
Yeah. And so it's again, I like sort of just starting off with a macro picture of it, of where we say, right, we know we've been lied to. There's this hidden hand. One of the ways it manipulates us is through distractions and manipulation of the psyche. Our way of trying to get out from it is this kind of call to adventure that the mystic feels, to become an outsider, to move away from the group. And one of the ways we do that is understanding psychology more. So as we've been describing, we get to understand like the perspective of Freud, of where we have all these base instincts, like kind of like an animal does in a way that sort of it comes forward and we act upon it. There's different ways that we work to try to repress that. And these architects of control, or this hidden hand, so to speak, they know how to pull those levers in order to get what they want for it. How else, I guess, as you were saying with it, they're ramping it up in a way of our distractions and of our different ways of sort of just keeping people from waking up to the truth and from, I guess, fighting back to free themselves from it. And it's going to end up creating this bifurcation that I see in people of where we're going to go towards what Nietzsche predicted as the last man. And there's going to be that type of individual who goes, okay, give me all of the distractions. I don't like myself. I don't like the world. They're full of anger and resentment and bitterness. And they go, well, just give me all of the AI. Let me take the blue pill in the matrix with it. And then you're going to get the other kind of person who says they go, no. And in a way, they become almost an extreme version of the mystic, maybe in the modern world, because the forces are so strong, or maybe it's always been that way. What are your thoughts on what else the mystic can do in order to help to free themselves from this? Or what are your thoughts on this last man and this bifurcation of where
I don't
people
know.
might go towards?
All I know is that a lot of people when you're on this mystical journey, that's when you make more mistakes than usual, because
Mm,
you're moving into territory that is unfamiliar and there aren't as many guides. And may have found Krishnamurti or one or two others, but the average other guy may not have actually benefited from their teachings and doesn't have it or has been even misled. So this is the difficulty, because you may hanker after a journey and you go on it and you simply come up empty. You don't find.
mm,
So it's a bit of, it's hard if you haven't grown up on the right movies, if you haven't grown up on the right music, right? If you haven't been listening to the proper poetry and lyrics
mm-hmm,
and studying the great arts and the great minds, you'll find very quickly. Remember, I talked about the reservoir of energy that you need. You also need this mental reservoir of energy. You've got to have the thoughts of the great ones very close at hand.
mm-hmm,
Otherwise, you will not make it. It's no different than somebody who eats bad food from morning till night. They're not going to make it. So you need the food for the mind. And that means staying very, very close to the Freuds, to the Jungs, you see, to these great minds that we've been talking about, the Viktor Frankls and what have you, right? And the Ayn
mm-hmm,
Rands.
mm-hmm,
And you need to nurture your spirit with their wisdom,
mm,
not become a fucking, a blind follower,
Yeah.
but realize
A
what's
parrot.
going on. When you have a Wilhelm Reich, when you're studying these people, an Arthur Yanov, an Alexander Lowen type, when you're reading these
Mhm.
masters, the people we refer to all the time, you've got what you're doing is you're strengthening your spirit body. And then also, if you've been working out and keeping yourself physically fit and getting into the Umwelt, being close to nature, there's certain factors. Now, in
Mhm.
most of the people that I have ever met, they're not doing any of that. They're mystics. They're attracted to the mystical path, but none of them are doing anything what I've just mentioned. They can't make it. They go psychotic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like you said earlier, they fall back into the pit.
Mhm.
The crabs pull them back into the bucket, or they just go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I tried a bit of that. When I was young, I tried that long-haired stuff. No, I'm back, straight up and down life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, don't talk to me about that. I'm a
Mhm.
born-again Christian now, because there are many people who go on the Siddhartha road, but they're by the time they get to the garden gate, they're already exhausted and have to go back. Well, there's no shortage. Look at all those fucking types going down take their ayahuasca trips down in the Amazon and swing from the trees right down there.
Mhm.
There's no end of this when it comes to the circus version of it.
Yeah.
But that's inauthentic. You know, these people are not even half aware of just what it really, really takes. And one of the things it takes is to make sure that you are not suffering from sort of spiritual malnutrition.
Mhm.
And therefore, that means reading and studying the greats, the great minds that came before you, who've already walked a lot of this path. And therefore,
Yeah.
you can nurture yourself with their knowledge. And then when you go on, to the next dimension, walk a bit of your own path, it's so much better because you have a compass now. Rather than trying to go out there and just flounder about, hoping that, no, it doesn't work that way. There's too many forces out there that can knock you for six.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, there's too many deceivers. And that's why people crawl back
Yeah.
into the cave and
Mhm.
close the door behind them.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
And yeah, let's even get into the psychology a little bit more of it. This is something I really want to do a deep dive in towards. So let's again just paint a bit of the picture for people. So we have the psyche, we have consciousness, we have this experience and of ourselves, and we have voices inside our own head, and they could be multiple voices, whether that's the voice of the conscience or the voice of the superego. So let's say we're trying to describe what the ego is, because I guess that in a way throws people off initially whenever they come to psychology because they hear ego and they think of it in the lay terms instead of how psychologists actually meant it. And my understanding of what they were writing about is sort of just like my experience immediately of what I'm conscious of. And then there's everything that sits outside of that, which is what Freud called the it, as you were saying, and things come in from the it, and then I experience them. And sort of like if you were looking to try to find it, say you put your hand in front of your face and you eventually just keep moving it. And then it exists somewhere outside of your perception. Doesn't mean it's not real, but similar in a way, if it was come back into your vision, these sort of energies or emotions or instincts come back up into your experience, i.e., into the egos. And that's filtered between the unconscious and what comes back into the ego. Can you speak a little bit more about how or what the ego is and how that's meant to develop over someone's life?
Yeah, it does develop.
Mm,
Freud said it develops through about 5 stages,
mm,
which is then complete around about the age of 6 or 7.
right.
And it's at this point that he claimed that the superego is formed. Others say
Mm,
that that was wrong and that the superego continues,
mm,
for many, many, many more years to develop. It's always developed. It doesn't just stop at 7. But generally speaking, the child's sense of other people's existence, that they
mm-hmm.
matter too,
Yeah.
and that there's a thing called the reality principle, all of these things, and that also the child now realizes there are restrictions on what you can do. Is by 6 or 7, it's
Mm-hmm.
we're there now. I will
Yeah.
be punished. I can't just do what I want. My teachers, they'll label me a delinquent. So all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
you wanted you want to keep it broad, like you said, in the macro. So the ego is a structure that
Mm-hmm.
emerged out of the id.
Mm-hmm. Out of the it.
Yeah. Where Freud said where id is, ego is there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like a great ocean, and from that ocean came a little hill that just rose above this swirling black ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Then on that hill, there came a little sort of fort or castle or even lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Then on that lighthouse, at the top of the lighthouse is a very bright light.
Mm.
So that's the ego.
Right.
And so, or you can say the whole island is an ego, but it's divided itself into these different structures,
Mm.
different evolutionary stages.
Mm.
And so when you go to sleep, you fall back into a sort of a pre-conscious, state.
Mm-hmm.
You don't completely go into the unconscious, but you're
Mm-hmm.
close to it. You come to the limen,
Mm-hmm.
and under deep hypnotism, you can be brought back into the unconscious, and there'll
Mm-hmm.
be a complete forgetfulness. And that was the stage you were when you were a fetus.
Mm-hmm.
And this matters enormously to everything that you're asking, is the state of the fetus, and maybe say for the first year of birth even. There's this
Mm-hmm.
euroboric, uh, embryonic feeling of security and omnipotence
Mm-hmm.
in which you don't have to move a muscle and everything is provided. And this feeling of comfort and effortlessness is never, ever lost. The hankering for that womb state is lifelong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's stronger in some and weaker in others. And when it's very, very strong in people, then unfortunately, those people are very, very what we call regressive, and
Mm-hmm.
even to the point of being schizophrenic. So a vast majority of the neurotic tendencies come from this inability to break the umbilical cord
Yeah.
and face the reality principle. But then as the child grows, its ego is slowly developing through these 5 levels. The oral, the anal, the phallic, and the genital, and then the final latency period where the superego is born. 4 to
Mm-hmm.
5 different levels. And there's been all arguments galore over all of this, right? I'm just keeping it very simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But what's really happening is that little island and the little fort is trying to defend itself against the swirling abyss from which it arose. Its
Mm-hmm.
roots are in that abyss,
Mm-hmm.
but it also has to differentiate itself from that abyss.
Mm-hmm.
And what we call consciousness is exactly that. It's a process of slow differentiation.
Mm.
There is no answer to how it happens or why. It's one of those mysteries I talked about. We talked about several, and this is another one. How did this even come about? How does this little plant, where is it ordained that it will rise from the mud and reach
Mm-hmm.
up into the sunlight? What force makes that possible?
Mm-hmm.
Materialist is never going to answer that. They know that's why they don't bother even trying. They give you a lot of guff about something else. Talk about evolution. No, what they do is they replace one mystery with another mystery. Well, it's nature, it's evolution, which you can't explain either. So you had one mystery, but then you give me another terminology of another mystery and expected me to now it's explained. You just keep adding on mysteries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this what you're talking about? Yeah.
We've mentioned the superego a few times. And again, this is a term maybe people come across in books, but you go, again, psychology is about a study of our own psyche and our own experience. How can people recognize what the superego is?
Well, see, here's the weird thing. How are we all going through the same process of development? If we're meant to be individuals, say the person who's arguing that we're all individuals, but the process of forming a psyche is universal to all people.
Yeah.
So a collectivist can come along and say, fuck you guys. Michael, what the fuck are you talking about? The very process of how an ego becomes an ego is collectivized. Every human being shares that path, just like it is your cell development.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to go, that's right, these are collective factors. So what it means is the individualism itself is a differentiated state that comes later in evolution, because the earlier parts are indeed, as these people argue, and I agree with them, collective. Just like tribal life precedes individual life.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's arguing that. We start off as social beings. Now, the ego is the pastiche of all the influences, you see, that lured you out into the world. Mother and father at the beginning, of course, but siblings and extended people. So the ego is a composite. What's individual about it? Not very fucking much. What the psychologists call self, capitalized S, is going to be the part of you that is the individualistic part. The ego, in one way, is the biggest fiction of all. The ego is a pastiche of everybody. And this is why, then, collectivism is so attractive to people, because the ego is already only understandable as it is embedded in a social sort of cluster. It feels happy there. It has the odd moment, right, of kicking and streaming. But no, ultimately, when you go into look at it closely, all egos are very much the same. And the way that was the very mechanism I'm talking about, the architecture, the architectonics of how an ego comes to be an ego is entirely popular. In the same way that your brain hemispheres developed, so does everybody else. Unless there's some biological, organic abnormality, then everybody's brain grows in the same way. So these are collective factors. And the collectivist will point to that and say, we're right. Individuality is a fiction. And you know something? For most people, it is.
Yeah.
It's only a fiction. It's what The Prisoner and these other shows are trying to point out. But Jung and other psychologists said, we're not going to leave it there. There is an individual aspect, but it must grow. Right? The bud, the flower of the tree is the self. And that's what this whole thing is moving towards, or psychologists call it, self-actualization. So one thing that comes out of this is that all the schools of known psychology are based primarily on the study of abnormal types. So when we say psychology as a subject, really we should be saying abnormal psychology, since it's mad people in asylums that Freud, Jung, Bleuler, Charcot, right? All of them were studying all sorts of loonies or malingers. In the famous hospitals of old.
Yeah.
So along comes a Captain Kirk type individual and goes, stop. Wouldn't it be better to have the reverse? Your psychology should be of heroism.
Yeah.
We should first know the psychology of the self-awakened, self-actualized, heroic person and work backwards from that, not start with theories that are from the worst of our human types. And people go, whoa, what? Yeah. That's pulling out, right, and saying psychology itself would have been better off, let alone the human race. The human race and the psychologists should have started with finding who are the heroic people, who are the Krishnamurtis, who are the Khalil Gibrans, who are the Leonardo da Vinci's, who are the William Blakes. Try to study their psychology and build your profiles, build your methodologies and your therapies on that. So in other words, have the perfected version first, Adam Kadmon, and work your way down to the pathological types.
Yeah.
And if you had done that, you wouldn't have half the fucking baloney that has come along, with all of it, all the detritus.
Yeah.
You guys have been pushing, like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill, starting with the worst examples of humankind and building psychology of that, and then trying to tell us you give us only a foggy picture of what it means to be a master and a hero.
Yeah.
And you know something? They're fucking right. And Ayn Rand would go immediately turn around, and Ayn Rand type character would go, oh yes, I'm for that. You should have listened to me. So it's not that you don't have people who did that to an extent, but it certainly wasn't common. So there's a big critique of psychology right there. Yes, it has helped us to an extent, but at what fucking cost?
Yeah.
And it helped to a degree when it left out the real what is man in his perfected state? Isn't that what the alchemists, isn't that what the mystics, isn't that what the
Hmm.
ancient Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
Adam Kadmon, is not Leonardo da Vinci's, Vitruvius is man.
Hmm.
Let me know about that man. He's perfected. He embodies the phi ratio and all of these other things that one could say,
Mm.
right? About man as perfect. You haven't studied him. You've studied abnormality. How can you guys be sane? If you spent your whole life studying madmen, I wonder about you, doctor in the white coat. Are you half as insane? And even some of your techniques may not be what you think they are, because the lab rat was already fucking diseased.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see, so there's some big screw missing here. So we are still not evolved yet. So it pertains to your question, because what we know of an ego, what we know of what we are, unfortunately, when you open the book to find out, it's an
Hmm.
encyclopedia of abnormality. It's predicated on abnormality, not on
Yeah.
perfection.
So there's a DSM.
Well, and that's how you
There's no
get that.
positive of it,
And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
the flower, the
That's all
rotten
psychology.
flower of the process I've
Yeah.
just described.
Yeah.
You're going to
Yeah.
get to that, and you're going to get the big pharma, and you're going to get all the injections and all the
Yeah.
nightmare list of it.
Yeah.
This drug
Yeah.
will make you insane. Be careful, right? It'll make you
Yeah.
homicidal or suicidal. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So you want to
Yeah.
look at the bigger picture. This is what we're doing. The whole wrong end of the stick has been got.
Yeah.
And it has also then caused many, many dark flowers of evil to blossom. Whereas if you had the hero archetype being studied by the philosophers and psychologists, then you could work your way backwards to find out what is unheroic might have been a better route, but we didn't do it that way.
So there's this long history of studying the sick and the ill, and they come up with a whole manual of diagnosing every little tiny thing that can go wrong with people. And then they use that to enslave you. You go, oh, well, how do we bring people towards that more? And how do we take them away from the truth? How do we entangle them up in that web? And that's another way of catching people as part of the collective.
And start,
Yeah.
in fact, it's so bad that now a child, as soon as he's born, is abnormal to them. Get the
Mad.
DSM-V out, because this child needs this many injections, this many scans, this much therapy, right? So even the child is considered so abnormal now, or needs even surgery to fix it. Didn't listen to the right music. They didn't listen to the right songs. They grew up, so the whole thing is bankrupt. And it's very difficult then to find the few philosophers, the few mystics, who see with this kind of clarity and stick very close then to their wisdom,
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're,
because you can train yourself to seeing all the imperfections, and that is vitally needed. I'm not denying it. But behind that, and more important than that, is the image of perfection that you need in the background. If you took that away, then what are you left with is only seeing nothing but imperfection all the time. And that in its own sense will breed another pathology, the one that most of the doctors and experts have got in their mind. They only see the imperfect.
yeah.
They're trained to see imperfection. They have no concept, no template of what is
Hmm.
perfection. And they won't listen to the few people that I specialize in that have painted that picture for you. They don't want to know. They slur it. They deride those types of thinkers.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, we're not talking about a lot of modern psychology where people go to a therapist and they sort of just go through a little bit of woo-wah. They're not really getting to the heart of it. Here's something wrong with you. Here's a label for what's wrong with you. And then you can attach to that label. Then here's the associate pill that goes along with it. Instead of going, oh, well, we have a psychology of the hero, of the heroic. Here's how to become heroic. And that will solve a lot of your bullshit that's going on in your life, and a lot of your problems.
There you go. That's right. And then the goal of that would be self-actualization. And you can involve at this point, once that's become the therapy's, raison d'etre, by all
Mm.
means, bring in your Freuds and your Adlers. Now, a lot of their work works even better.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially Alfred Adler's work really comes alive when you're looking at that. And he's not the only one. Viktor Frankl's, what he called a search for meaning, the
Hmm.
will to meaning, which he
Yeah.
borrowed from Nietzsche's will to power and upgraded it. Now there's real movement Outer ranks,
Mm.
will therapy becomes
Yeah.
important now. Achievement, goals, right?
Mm.
Leaving the herd, being strong. There's a lot of things that now come in. And it's not to say that there are good therapists out there, even in this abnormal system, that are still very good.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I'm not denying that. But this is a paradigm busting thing we're talking about now that hasn't seen the light of day and nobody talks about.
And this is what a lot of the greats, there is systems in place for us to look at where we can see this sort of this psychology of the hero, and of the Siddhartha path that is the hero's way. And this ties back right into the start of where did ancient man used to do this? How could they pass that information on over time? And we talk about the great myths. And you started with speaking about, it was learning about the myths of Ireland that initially got you into it. And so, would you speak a little bit about psychology and about mythology as well and how they come together?
Yeah, well, that's a huge thing, right? But see, in the ancient days, and this included the study of tarot and astrology, by the way,
Mm.
the individual shaman would take on a pupil, or the mystic or the hermetic school would
Mm-hmm.
take on a pupil. And for them, it was a very important initiatory stuff that it was all about symbolism,
Mm-hmm.
being introduced to symbolism so that then you could start to slowly start identifying with symbols that matter to you, right? Now, Carl
Mm-hmm.
Jung picked up on this correctly when he understood something about this, because he, unlike Freud, discovered a deeper layer of the consciousness that he called the unconscious, the collective unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
which is a reservoir basically of all of these symbols. So when you dream in symbols, right? Now, in this archive, this collection of ancient symbols, there are ones that will speak to you personally. He discovered. But he discovered it because he'd been studying these old manuscripts of the alchemists and the hermeticists of years gone by. Right. And he came upon this, and he realized that symbols of meditation, he called them symbols of transformation,
Mm-hmm.
were hugely important to to the ancient mystics.
Mm-hmm.
And this involved tree worship and star worship and just animal totems,
Yeah.
and all sorts of things. And even then more numinous symbols that come from the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my answer there. That's not, you don't fight, it's only in the Jungian model that you get that today.
Okay. And so we're talking about psychology and we're talking about mythology and we got a little bit onto the work of Carl Jung as well. I asked you about myths and how mythology and psychology sort of comes together. And I guess I was kind of thinking of the work of Erich Neumann, who was Freud, Jung's sort of top student that followed in his footsteps. And he wrote that extraordinary book about the origin and history of consciousness. And essentially, he sort of described how there was this evolution of the ego over time. Like it sort of be projected on the sort of the movement of the sun and the sun rising and the sun setting with it. Would you speak a little bit about your understanding of his work and about mythology and about, I guess this ties into religion going into the past as well, also.
Oh, it sure does. Remember when I talked about those who expanded on Freud's work,
Mm-hmm.
especially his analysis of the earliest stages of
Yeah.
birth? This is where Erich Naumann comes in very, very strongly. My book, Dragon Mother, is
Mm-hmm.
dedicated to him and features a lot of his work in that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and you're right. He is talking a lot about symbols. He's talking about a lot about the unconscious. He talks a lot about the serpent symbolism. Now it's connected to the mother archetype in both her positive, benign aspect, but also her terrible aspect. It's a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a devouring figure.
Yeah.
And again, here you have this classic ambivalence between something
Mm-hmm.
that's there to nurture and prepare and initiate and make ready for the reality principle, as opposed to the other side, which is dark, regressive, prohibitive, and prevent, it's necrophilus,
Yeah.
holds one back from evolution.
Love of
And both
death.
parents are guilty of this, of course. But the mother has a
Mm.
special role because the mother is the one that offers all that nutrition and assistance and comfort that we so much hanker over. We came from her womb. And so
Mm.
that need to be in this sort of effortless,
Yeah.
incubated space carries through, for the rest of our lives. So this fascinated Jung and it fascinated Naumann.
Mhm.
And they then wanted to look at the symbols that are associated with
Mhm.
this. And what they found out is that these symbols are very odd. They have this sort of a dualistic element because as we know, the serpent could be a symbol of great evil, but
Yeah.
also of great good. So he
Mhm.
wanted to write about symbols like that. And another guy called Edward Edinger also picked up on this. He was another Jungian. Most of the Jungians did,
Mm.
but nobody did it better than Naumann, right? So
Mhm.
they wanted to take all of this different symbolism and investigate it, both from the positive and the negative, and how it
Mhm.
is even possible that a symbol that we associate with something positive and good can
Mhm.
double up and be something that can also destroy a mind. So this strange ambivalence. And each of them came up with their own explanations for that, what that's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend those works. And
Yeah.
as I say, Naumann's particular work was of a huge importance to me, in my book on Dragon Mother, where
Yeah.
I give my own theories about the terrible mother archetype
Mm.
and, yeah, get into all of that. Very, very important because in ancient times, this was the key
Yeah.
that a triangle just wasn't a triangle. A dragon wasn't just a dragon, a winged horse or a tree. Like, say, if you took out the 22 cards of the tarot, these were not just dead symbols. They
Mhm.
mattered. They were individualized. People selected them.
Mhm.
This is before a religion. That's why you have a star sign,
Mm.
for instance. It was all of this. It was breaking down. In fact, even in the individual stars became important in your birth chart as symbols. And that
Yeah.
would be your symbol, of your clan, but also of even an individual.
Mhm.
And you'd talk to it, you commune with it, you'd wear the symbol, the badge, the talisman,
Mhm.
you'd pray to it. And of course, we know the sun. Of course, nobody needs to tell us that the sun was a very powerful symbol collectively. Or somebody like Akhenaten, the pharaoh, was into the sun as the number one symbol. He tried to make that the most. But that's an example of what I'm talking about. In ancient days, people would pick a particular planet or star, like
Mhm.
Venus or Jupiter, and worship it. And then
Mhm.
that developed later on into cults that would then, follow the luminaries too. But it's
Yeah.
not something that is gone. The unconscious mind, you see, still works on that level, funny
Yeah.
enough. These still matter. And when it comes to therapy, deep psychic therapy or the spiritual path, you'll soon find
Mhm.
that doing sacred geometry, painting, all sorts of the arts come flooding back. And, Jung used to notice that his clients like to do mandalas, for instance, painting mandalas. All a reason for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it's something I want to come back to maybe in a separate discussion. I'll leave it for next time. Definitely about your book on Dragon Mother. It's unbelievably fascinating. No one else is covering that type of thing at all. I guess one of the big things I wanted to chat about was, again, we'll maybe leave this to next time, is about consciousness itself, about its evolution over one's life, how the knowledge of that is used to sort of enslave people. And I guess it goes into the occult deeper, because we've mentioned the tarot a few times. I think the Kabbalah came up once as well in our discussion. So I don't know them in great depth. I know a little bit about them, but I've always sort of looked at them kind of like as an analogy wise. Say if somebody wants to learn something like the martial arts and wants to master something, you go through the different kinds of belts and different kinds of phases. You go for your white belt, your blue, your purple, brown, black, or whatever. So too is the Kabbalah, is maybe a way, or these secret societies or these ancient cults with it, were ways to try to help develop consciousness in a certain direction or how to try to evolve it, and if you know what I mean. Do you see it as that kind of way, or do you have a different take on it?
Well, yeah, the Kabbalah is very ancient and it's not Jewish.
Mm,
The Jews
mm,
preserved it.
mm,
They have credit for preserving something that didn't belong to them.
yeah.
They are inherited, just like Christians and others inherited pagan lore,
Mm,
from previous cultures. So the Kabbalah actually comes from the old Aryan tribes and traditions, the Persians, especially the Persians, but others as well. And it ultimately comes from the Druids of the West.
Mm.
Yep. Others as well. Because you see, the Norse people have their own Kabbalistic tree of life.
Right.
Yeah, it's very similar, called Midgard. The central garden with the Yggdrasil, the sacred tree, right, with its 9 divisions. It's very similar to the
Mm.
Jewish Kabbalah. And it's all based in ancient tree worship. But that doesn't mean anything to anyone listening to us unless you expand what the word tree worship meant. It's not just
Yeah.
tree hugging,
Yeah.
some hippie thing. It was a very universal, powerful, the world ash tree was meant to go through the whole planet, be the center of the entire universe. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. It's all been forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And if you count how many trees there are, in the Bible, look at the book of Genesis, tree of good and evil, tree of knowledge, the great oak. The trees turn up everywhere, but you don't even notice it. The fig and all the rest of it, the Mount of Olives, it's all there, but it's used to be even more.
Mm-hmm.
Some people relate it even to a goddess tradition, and that's fair. There's certainly something to be said about that.
Yeah.
So it goes back into this old pagan tree lore, but the secrets of it were lost. So by the time the Jews got hold of it, they didn't know what they had.
Right.
And so different Jewish scholars then tried to write about it, well-meaningly. They thought, oh, well, fuck, it's like, we've lost the manual.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll give it as our best shot. And so they assigned these Jewish terms, Hebrew words, to the paths, to the Sephirah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And added a lot of qualities and attributions that really don't make a lot of sense, to tell you the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting and what have you, but no, they did their best. There's nothing evil in what they were doing. It's just like you have somebody brings you, a bunch of chapters in a book,
Mm-hmm.
but the introduction and the beginning chapters are lost, or brings you a piece of a map. Most of it's gone. What are you going to do? You're going to speculate, you see?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the ancient archive was burned. It was desecrated. It was lost. All over the world, this is the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so the traditions that preserved it like to be seen as, oh, this is ours. But a real student knows right away, no. This doesn't belong to you. This is coming from something far more ancient, but it's a lost wisdom. And one has to then tread very carefully. They have to study a lot to piece it all together. I wrote 2 volumes called The Trees of Life.
Yeah.
Where I give my take on that as well. These are excellent, as I said, one-of-a-kind books, because this tree worship goes into a lot of different areas you wouldn't first think of.
Mm.
Anyone unfamiliar, you wouldn't even believe.
Yeah.
And recently we did a series called On the Dead Sea Scrolls, 10 parts. And towards the end of that, we went into a little bit of this as well.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah, just a little bit. Episode 7 and 8, I think we talked a little bit about, the significance. But man, you see, most of the problems is a lot of this was corrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, when you're talking about the psychology of it, certain symbols start coming into people's dreams. And naturally, they're very worried, because if they see symbols that their culture has demonized, they're going to think they're possessed or something. They keep seeing fiery dragons or other weird creatures, right?
Yeah.
Gods with antlers or stag head, they're, oh, fuck hell, it's the devil.
Yeah.
So this is why you need to be familiar with your Jungian therapy to go, shut up. Don't carry all that baggage, right? These are symbols of transformation. Something's happening to you, and you've got to welcome these symbols in, even though they may be frightening on the surface. Because again, we've got that dual aspect. We've got the dream as it really is, but the dream we remember when we woke up is a censored dream. The superego and the ego has altered the dream. So we've already got a problem. If you're sitting with Jung, you could say, Mr. Jung, unless the dream is really, really, really powerful and numinous, isn't it true that both you and Freud have said that there's an editing already takes place and that the dream remembered is not the same as the dream? In fact, the dream remembered is barely even remembered. And they go, that's right. That's why you can't remember most of your dreams. The editor is so strong that most times you wake up and go, I had this amazing dream. What was it about? Can't remember.
Yeah.
Proving there's an editor.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
that editor not just stops you remembering the dream, it even edits the actual content of the dream.
Mhm.
Oh my God. So this is where Freud came in and said, you need an interpreter.
Mhm.
You need to sit with me or somebody like me who can back engineer the dream. So you dreamed of a ladder, or you dreamed of a girl with red hair, right? Well, no, that's all baloney. This is what it really refers to.
Mhm.
What? Didn't you say that you were on a boat at the time that happened in the dream and you
Mhm.
were on water? Right. Let's decode the symbolism, you see? So this is the thing. The dream comes to you already with a kind of camouflage, with trickery, because there's
Mhm.
something strange about the dynamic between conscious and unconscious. Part of the ego defenses is to block content from the unconscious.
Mhm.
But psychologists like Jung were saying, but we need some of that content from the unconscious.
Yeah.
So now they're adding a dimension that, and Freud agreed. Why do you think Freud started doing therapy with his clients? Because this was, again, talk about it. Talk about your problems. Tell me about
Yeah.
your dreams. He invented it. But they took for granted that it's not a one-to-one revelation. Something is editing content. What?
Yeah.
Well, they call it the superego, or one of the defenses of the ego, these structures that you're talking about. And that's why you wake up when there's a jolt. You know, when you have a nightmare or a dream where something really powerful hits you,
Mhm.
you suddenly wake up because the editor's going, oh, there's something I couldn't edit.
Wow.
Shit,
Yeah.
that leaked into consciousness and fucking woke you up. The sensor broke down. So now you've got an interpretation issue going on. But then comes in those philosophers, some of them are the existential philosophers, said, I'm not going any further with this conversation
Mhm.
because now you're setting up this fucking Mr. Freud or Mr. Jung as a bloody high priest.
Yeah.
Look, we've just got rid of these black robes. Man, Nietzschean man has been free of these bastards, and now you've got them in the white coats.
Yeah.
Interpreters, my ass. So now
Mhm.
then came a school of psychology that said, we're not going to set up a new priesthood of these smart Alex who are going to tell you what your dreams mean.
Mhm.
Well, you're so divorced from yourself that you don't even know what your own dream. You can't even bring. You're meant to be a self. The
Yeah.
only person who can interpret your fucking dreams is you.
Mhm.
But then we go, oh no, I make a bollocks of it. What the psychologist told me is incredibly accurate. It's changed my life. What are you talking about? I need these guys. So now you got two schools fighting each other. Those who are anti-psychiatric, anti-psychological school, right? I've studied them.
Yeah.
And you get the other guys who go, no, we help you. This is our therapy. We've transformed thousands of lives, millions of people's lives
Mhm.
by decoding these symbols and what they mean. We've helped them enormously. And so each of
Yeah.
us has to then decide, which side we're on. I
Yeah.
myself have always gone back and forth between the two because I realize the arguments of both sides.
Yeah.
If you have somebody interpreting your dreams, that can bring up a lot of very, very serious existential issues in our world.
Mhm.
That can bring another tyranny. It can make you divorced from your own self. So I
Mhm.
wrote a book on that called Disciples of the Mysterium, based on the philosophy of personalism. That the only
Brilliant.
person who knows your psyche inside out is you. Or,
Mhm.
as we're hinting in this program, you should be. You should be your own interpreter. Sure, you can pay attention to what Newman and others have done. I think it's helpful. But at the end of the day, the real Siddhartha road begins when you work with the symbols. That's why I'm into the tarot cards, for instance. Right? A
Mhm.
lot of my work goes into that. This is the reason.
Mhm.
And then it becomes a secondary thing that what others have to say.
Mhm.
So what I mean is, if you're a member of this school, you turn around and go, you know who Dr. Jung knew all about he was an expert in? His own dreams.
Yeah.
Freud,
Yeah. That's it.
mate, the psyche you know the best is yours. Don't talk to me about mine. I
Mhm.
know that became fashionable. I know that's a trend.
Mhm.
And I might have also colluded in it because I'm desperate and I don't want to be, I think I'm going insane. So I'll lie on your couch and we'll go through this fucking game here.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I don't like the smell of this. And you had the guys who didn't. Karl Kraus, Jean-Paul Sartre, Thomas Zaz. There's a list of people who warned society about this. And they have to be taken seriously. So in my work, I'm not just this blind believer, in the schools of psychology. I take them very carefully.
Mhm.
I weigh them up with the past philosophers, that they are answering. And I
Yeah.
have a much broader view than most people would ever have. I've studied it intensely, and I know where the pitfalls are, but I also know where to give credit where credit's due.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here today. I guess
Yeah.
we'll leave people with something maybe just to think about. We spoke a little bit about, being an individual, understanding the lie, understanding that there's this sort of, methodologies to try to enslave us, and psychology plays a big part in that. And yeah, there is this censor that exists within ourselves, and I think that is part of something that is manipulated, and that's one of the ways that the sort of the trick is done, or the sleight of hand. And so maybe people should think about how they censor themselves, and what is it they're really censoring, and what is it they don't want to know. But yeah, I guess we'll stop there and we'll come back and we'll go into it much further. And I think we should do an episode maybe about the tarot as well, and going into the symbolism of that, and yeah, and how this plays into the rites of passage that a mystic should try to take, or that they might inevitably might go through, because it's
Sure.
archetypal in a way. Is there
It,
anything you'd like to end with there, Michael? Yeah, any final comments?
well, yeah, just to thank you a lot for this opportunity. It's great to be part of what you're doing as a project on YouTube
Brilliant.
here, and I'm sure we'll have to, this is a good introductory one. I'm sure we'll do
Mhm.
more in the future. But you're quite right. This idea of self-deceptiveness is key.
Mhm.
That part where you have an external enemy, I think we all
Mhm.
know that and we're good. We've oiled up on that. I think we're
Mhm.
we've done some excellent work in the world on that.
Mhm.
We really have.
Yeah.
It's commendable, most people. But on the side where our own cognitive dissonance is involved
Mhm.
and our own editing suites that we carry around in our minds, this is where, there's a lot more work needs to be done.
Mhm.
And the focus on consciousness and its mysteries. This has been
Yeah.
left out, sadly. So in my
Mhm.
work, we try to compensate for that.
Mhm.
But the thing is, it takes you into areas that a lot of people don't want to tread.
Yeah.
You say Sigmund Freud, and they just hear you saying that Jew, that's
Wow.
psychology shit. See, I mean, there's always these filters, and this is ridiculous. This is
Yeah.
as bad as the academics who have their own paradigm, limits. See, you're never going to make progress on the true Siddhartha road. You may fire a lot of, arrows at an enemy, but self-actualization will not be involved.
Yeah.
This will be purely, fighting the external dragon,
Mhm.
but the dragon's got you because it knows how to work behind your back,
Yeah.
right? It's the internal enemy, the enemy within. You
Yeah.
have let run ragged because you were closed-minded and you didn't go to scholars just because of this, that, and the other. See, I studied them all. Left wing, right wing, Catholic, Protestant, whatever. Jew, Gentile. In the
Mhm.
search for knowledge, that's what you have to do. And it makes me very, very, very different than what's out there. I mean, and people can confirm this. I mean, everyone listening to us now should know just how
Absolutely.
brutal it's become in terms of attacking and partisanness.
Mhm.
And that can be a handicap because some of the gems that you need, some
Mhm.
of the ammunition that you need, and the stabilizers and the nourishment you need comes from kind of places you normally wouldn't think of going.
Mhm.
I've been arguing this, since the first book on Atlantis. Yeah, and so that eclectic, spontaneity, open-mindedness, that's the kind of person I relate with best, I think. And yeah, I've got my free websites. People can check it out. Come over to Join Enslaved, or,
Absolutely.
definitely, I've got free articles galore on msar.com. michael@tsarion.com. And, we'll do more. These were great questions, Matty. I really appreciate it. It's not every podcaster that wants to go into these directions, especially when it comes to questions of consciousness.
Yeah.
So at least we kicked it off, a bit, there's more to go into.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we will do that in the future.
Yeah, we're really only skimming the surface of this.
Yeah.
We really are. Yeah, we've hardly dipped a toe into the water.
You got it.
But yeah, absolutely. Everybody should sign up to Unslaved. I think there's over 450 different podcasts on there covering every range of topic of all different schools of philosophical thought, different types of psychology, of ancient history, of alternative research, you name it. You guys have covered it all, and you've done it with great detail. And as I said, it always comes with the receipts. So anybody that has any sort of doubt, like, you can go and you can read the great authors yourselves, and you can make up your own minds about it. But again, we said it's an individual road, but again, thank you so much again for coming on. You've been so gracious with your time, and I really, really appreciate it, Michael. And then I hope we can do it again soon. But everybody sign up to the Substack as well. We'll leave all the links down below.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Sounds good, mate. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Super. Brilliant. Thanks.